Okay, with Brokeback Mountain, I think we're venturing into what I would label postmodern Westernism. This is the break, the shatter, the shield of modern Westernism. You know, modern Westernism and the Westerns of the 90s, you had like Unforgiven and all that stuff. Here we have a different angle and approach with using the same kind of genre. And I think it's interesting because we still have a writer that wrote classical Westerns that wrote the screenplay for this movie. Hi, everybody. Today we're going to talk about Brokeback Mountain.
Yeah, so join us for the, so many people pigeoned it as a gay cowboy movie, but it's a movie that's so much more.
I think so.
We're going to figure out what.
Yeah.
Hey folks, welcome back to the show. I'm one of your hosts, Kyle Goethe from GoatFilmReviews.com.
I'm Nick from the St. Paul Filmcast. Thanks for watching. Thanks for following us. And for our loyal fans, thank you for continued support of the show. You can follow the show on Twitter and on Instagram. Both Kyle and I are members of the Minnesota Film Critics Alliance. Check out the webpage for other critics' reviews as well as ours. And today we're going to talk about a film that should have won Best Picture in 2005. It's Brokeback Mountain.
Yeah, so in the summer of 1963, two ranch hands spend the season as shepherds on Brokeback Mountain. While there, they begin a love affair that would span decades in secret as they start separate families and try to shuffle their lives to survive a world that wouldn't accept them.
When I mentioned it as postmodern Westernism, I mean, you don't get the power of the dog without this movie. You don't get a lot of what I would say is subtlety of characters rather than action and trying to survive the town and bad guys coming in and taking, you know, what we've seen in High Noon or Recycled and everything. What you've seen is a transition that you can apply these stories of a romance, of love story in the out and open in the Western environment. I think you could take it out at any genre, but I think it needs to be a Western.
I think the Western element is something that gives the film a certain uniqueness, because I think you're right. I think Unforgiven was probably the last classic Western. Like, that was the last of the breed of, like, the classical Lone Ranger kind of a
that was the last
quest.
Last lap around the course.
And then you'd have things like 95's, like The Quick and the Dead, and, like, those kinds of films as they searched for what a Western is. I think it was kind of like a looking for the identity of a Western in the 90s on into the early 2000s.
We talked about The Quick and the Dead. Yeah.
And so those films are kind of like the death knell for Westerns as they tried to figure out what a Western can be and should be.
Had a lead female protagonist be the hero.
Yeah, and so they were trying a lot of new things, and some worked, some didn't, and some were in that mixed category. And then you get something like Brokeback Mountain, which is a story where the Western is almost an aesthetic to the film, you know?
Correct. That's what
it's
I'm
almost
talking
like
about.
how, like, noir is a style. It's not exactly a film genre, it's a style, and that's kind of like how Western is like used as a backdrop for this film, where the film could be about a lot of different things.
Which is a great staple for postmodern aesthetics or writings or artworks, is the aesthetic first, and then you submit what you want to put into it. Right, because it's a Western, but you don't have the bang bang, shoot 'em up, and all that stuff, and all that wrangle of it.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I love the contrast. I always look for contrast. That here you have two guys who have to wrestle with that they love each other, but they're going to fight it even with themselves. Their, what he calls that thing, catches us.
Yeah.
But they portray it out in the open. They're out in the open in the naked to the world.
Yeah.
But it's still very dangerous. I love the contrast. It's an open landscape.
Yeah.
But it's still kind of trying to suppress it even more.
Well, and it's played out in that, really well in that scene where Randy Quaid's character, Joe, becomes aware of it. He sees what's going on when he's
Almost,
out there.
even though it's out in the open in the world, but he's almost like, it's almost criminal what he's doing.
Yeah, and he's he feels like
Even though it's his sheep, right? Yeah.
Seeing it happening, and then how that it almost is that struggle with Quaid's character where he's trying to even like figure out how to get rid of them, like how to get them out and not have to work with them again. Yeah. And so like every character is kind of like looking through this lens of what's accepted and what's not accepted, and that's where I really think it felt to me that the film started with Jake Gyllenhaal's Jack as our protagonist, but it actually morphed into Heath Ledger's character of Enos.
I do this all the time with my writing. I start with one character, and then when I start into the second act, I'm like, damn, it's about another. God dang it.
And I think I really like when that happens, when one character
I'm not criticizing, but
yeah. It's not something that's done as often, and I always question, because sometimes it feels intentional and sometimes it feels accidental. Where a certain character rises to the top. But I think this is one where it's almost like we start looking at it because, Jake's is the emotional character. Jack Twist is the emotional character.
He's the out, right.
Yeah, Enos is the one that is struggling the whole film to accept not what he is, but what he is to himself.
Physically, he's almost. And I think that scene is hard to interpret. That scene, and after all the events transpired, that he goes in the shed and almost throws up. Mm-hmm. But I think it's almost of him being true to himself. This is what you are, and almost he's repulsed by it. Not so much he's missing Jake.
Yeah.
But I think he's so repulsive that he's understanding who he is. And he's almost going to throw up.
And he
about
hates
it.
himself.
And he hates himself. Yeah.
And I think it's so interesting. Yeah, that they both leave this encounter, if you will, and immediately find themselves in heterosexual relationships with two women. And,
immediately.
Yeah, of course, like Enos already was engaged, but the way Jack meets Lorene, played by Anne Hathaway, is a very much like how you would see it's almost like
well, costuming is very important. Costuming. If she's brightly, look at me.
Yeah.
Even though it's a pageantry, even though it's a horse competition, it's almost like a pageantry of a beauty contest.
Yeah, and so you almost think that Jack's character isn't really searching for her, but it's something where he sees her and subconsciously
it's like a red siren.
He loves her.
What about her? What about her that you can hide who you really are? Yeah.
Yeah, and so it's so fascinating to see how they react to it. But one thing that director Ang Lee takes this film to another level with is that it's not just the story of Jack and Enos. It's the story of Lorene and Alma as well. When you see what their relationship does to everyone else around them. And it's not because what they're doing is wrong inherently. It's that what they're doing is wrong in the time and how it affects everyone else around them.
Well, the overall how I take this whole movie is based on the title is when you can't in society will not accept you for being gay, it breaks all relationships. It's pretty much it's a crack in everything because they marry because that's what society tells me. They have kids and that breaks up the whole relationship. It broke everything.
Yeah,
and even the characters inside themselves.
It sends every person around them into a same kind of a spiral where they're all trying to live what is as close to a normal life as they can, but what everyone is doing here is not normal in the time period. So like the Jack and Lorene characters, as they continue to age, it's almost like they fall into a rhythm of two people who work together, two people who spend time together. And you can tell that Lorene, I do think she loves him. And I think there is a love for her, but it's kind of like a kind of confused trying to figure out where I am. Yeah.
It's really awkward, which is nice. It's interesting. Every other relationship in this movie is awkward except for Jack and Enos's relationship. And that is not...
And theirs is only made awkward.
It's made awkward, but it's not really smooth. It's violent. Mm-hmm. I mean, he's really putting up a fight of, I don't want to do this.
Yeah, I think there's that thing where Enos punches Jack. And I think he actually broke his nose or had actually fractured something in his nose because of how intense the sequence was. And these two actors knew each other before making the film. So I'm sure there was kind of an awkwardness of hey, this is my buddy and we're in this movie together, we're playing love. I'm sure there was kind of an initial awkwardness to it. I think the first scene in the tent
it plays out a little bit.
Takes.
They have to be awkward.
Yeah, and so you have to I think Ang Lee needed to find the right amount of awkward. He needed to find the moment in the film. So they did 13 takes of that first encounter because he said some of them were too friendly and some of them were too awkward, and he had to find something in the middle.
I think he found the right temperament. This is really a good pick. Not only for the content, it's really shot really well. Mm-hmm. I think Ang Lee took a lot of inspiration from Ingrid Bergman. I wouldn't be surprised if Ingrid Bergman did this film because it's aesthetically, it's very simple, 3 color tones. Even with the cars, they're dark, but the blue sky and the green, it's very simple 3 color tone, and it's very simple open landscape. But the complexity is people in the movie.
Okay, yeah, and see, I saw, of course, elements, and part of it was that I had seen Larry McMurtry's name in the screenplay, and I was like, oh yeah, he wrote The Last Picture Show and stuff. So I saw elements of The Last Picture Show's desert town aesthetic, and again how Last Picture Show is in many ways not about one character. There is a central character in the town that affects everyone around them, but that's also kind of how this film is. There's a central relationship that affects everyone around them.
It breaks everything around them.
Yeah,
I think you have the same similarity from Last Picture Show where the adults ruin it for the kids. Mm-hmm. Actually want to sleep with some of the kids. And then you have this where you cannot be gay.
Society's breaking the...
Yeah, society says you can't be gay, you can't be out in the open, and then you have to do this, and it's going to break everything. Everybody's going to be broken.
Yeah, and so there's that central level of tragedy that hits so many people involved in the film. We got to talk about Michelle Williams, who I think she gives my favorite performance in the film, and it's specifically that moment where she sees the two of them embracing when they hadn't seen each other for 4 years. And she had said in an interview that she was playing Alma as a character who had never seen or heard of a gay person. Like that it was just like, it was never discussed. It was never part of the discussion.
The ignorance.
And so she saw it and she almost like had no idea how to process it. And you can see it when you watch that response, is that she sees these two people embracing, kissing, hiding to do it. And she can't even really, like, it's almost like her brain breaks.
Yeah, because the ignorance of it. Right.
And then from that point on, she sees her marriage as a ticking time bomb that is just slowly running out the clock. And that's such a painful thing to watch. And as the film plays out, that relationship just gets more broken, more fractured. And it just, it hurts. It hurts the whole time.
And so tragedy always breeds a romance, because like Casablanca, it's not a happy ending.
Yeah.
In this movie, it's not going to be a happy ending, but we know the authenticity of it. We know the authenticity of both them, even though they don't want to admit it to themselves sometimes.
Yeah. The through line of the film, the climax is in many ways, it's exactly how it was going to play out, whether it played out at that specific time period or 10 years down the road. When you have two people who are in love who only share like 2 days every 4 months together and then are separated and have to live a lie, then you eventually will have, no matter how much time is in that person's life, one of them will die first and the other one will have to reckon with the fact that they could have done something more. And it's, again, that almost is like a soft ticking time bomb for the film even. We know that relationship will eventually be fractured in that way.
One of the interesting things, and I think it's hard to do as a writer, and Kyle will agree, is authentic dialogue. And I think dialogue here, probably one of the best written of that decade, of 2000s, because you get authenticity from Enos's dialogue. When he kind of doesn't like, we're not going to have a gay relationship, he does. When that thing gets us again.
Yeah, avoiding the elephant in the room kind of a thing,
right?
You know?
So it's dialogue that's certainly assigned to each character. True. I would have said that's the way that character would speak. That's very hard to do as a writer. And I think Alan captures it perfect. That's another step of why I think this movie should have won Best Picture.
Yeah, at the time, I'd only seen Crash once and Brokeback once, and I was on the side of like, neither one was my favorite movie of the year, but Crash winning, I was like, okay, but I still remember hearing that audible gasp in the Oscar theater when Jack Nicholson said Crash, because just everyone assumed that Brokeback was going to win. But that's also kind of the time too.
That's my simple criticism. Brokeback is memorable and unforgettable. I will never forget I've seen this movie. Crash, I'll rent it again and go, oh yeah, that's that movie.
There's a lot of things that happen in Crash, but the film's not about.
It's not memorable at all. It's very forgettable. It's very forgettable.
Yeah.
For me, a great movie has to be unforgettable and has to be memorable. This is both. There are some great camera work. There's some great, really authentic character development in this movie.
And this was such an important movie to me because I know that my mom had reached out to me when I was I was like 15 at the time, and she said, "Hey, we should watch this movie." And I didn't know anything about it at the time, so I was like, okay, sure.
Oh, you're like Alma. You're a little ignorant.
Yeah, well, I was just like, I didn't know like what the film was about, but I knew like all
not
the
about
news
the gays,
stations.
but just you didn't know about the movie wasn't on your radar.
Yeah, like I'd seen like people talking about it on the news afterwards. I recognized the name. It was again like all the news stations call it the gay cowboy movie, and that's kind of how I thought of it as too. Was like,
it spawned a bunch of memes, memes and SNL jokes.
Well, yeah, and then of course afterwards, like people would recreate the trailer, and they would do like a Back to the Future one where they'd show like Doc and Marty. Show scenes that implied their, homosexual behavior, and
but that's how you get retainment from it. That's how people keep it in your memory about it. Yeah.
And so I didn't really know why she was so adamant about seeing it, but I mean, it didn't matter to me watching a movie with my mom. We love watching movies together, and so she'd seen people talk about it at work. We eventually rented the film and watched it, and I think something had clicked for me because I lived in a very small town. There either wasn't anyone I knew that was gay, or nobody who was out about, or anything like that. We didn't have anyone in our town that I knew personally about that. Since watching Brokeback Mountain, later on discovered I had family members who had come out, who had been out, and I just didn't know because it wasn't discussed. And it was one of those movies where I saw, coming out of this film, I saw these as human beings, and I understood. And that, like, at that moment, I remember thinking to myself, why can't they be together? Who the hell cares? That kind of became my mantra of like, what does it matter to you what these two people do if it doesn't affect you? Yeah, and that was always been my argument.
And that's the reason why I love the aesthetic shot of the film is it's out in the open, but it's still it's like, who the hell cares? There's nobody around.
Yeah.
But it's still gonna break, if anybody finds out, right?
Yeah, their gay sex does not murder people. Like the act of having gay sex with these two people doesn't make someone's head explode 2 miles away. If that were the case, I'd be more concerned. It's not. Like, it doesn't affect any of the characters, and yet everybody takes it as a slight. The society takes it as a slight, and that's why I was really impressed. I'd forgotten that David Harbour from Stranger Things was in this movie. Mm-hmm. He plays LaShawne's husband. I forgot the whole sequence with him where he kind of like doesn't out himself, but he kind of talks to Jack about we should go out to my cabin sometime. And I was like, it's right there. It's out. They're outside even again, bringing it up again.
Yeah, it's presented how it probably is. Mm-hmm. You have to kind of like, kind of like that before so you get punched in the face.
How terrifying that must have been to be a person who is
constantly have to be on your guard,
and especially in a profession that is deemed as such a man's profession, right, where if you showcase any weakness at all, you could get your ass kicked. And that's why that scene where Enos is thinking about Jack's death and imagining it as though it was a murder instead, and we're still not really sure how it all took place. That's a horrifying scene to me because that is exactly how Enos would think.
You have to toughen yourself up and express yourself anyway. Well, you have to keep that in time. That's why Enos is almost throwing up, thinking about, I just did that. I can't believe I did that.
What am I going to do now? Yeah.
Cinematography is by Rodrigo Prieto. I think I said that right.
Yeah.
So well that he's worked with Argento and Scorsese.
Yeah.
He did.
I know he did The Wolf of Wall Street.
He did Argo, which won Best Picture.
One of my favorite films from 2006, Babel. He
Yeah.
shot, which is a fantastic movie. Yeah. And again, shot very well. But I like that Prieto has a thing where his style is similar to the director's style. Like, he latches on to the director's style and utilizes that, because if you look at repeat films that he's done with other directors, they look very similar to each other. But then if you can watch like Babel and Wolf of Wall Street and Brokeback Mountain, they each have a very different license.
Wolf of Wall Street is very busy.
Yeah, and it's
very
really
Scorsese, like, we're gonna shoot here and action and everything, and here it's all quiet.
He's almost like that Pink Floyd prism, where like all the light shines through and then like comes out a different way, where he like translates what they're wanting into a way that's palatable.
It's not being clever.
Prieto actually appears in the film too, because so he plays the prostitute that Jack picks up
behind the barn.
Yeah,
kind of thing? Yeah,
because apparently the actor they got was either too short or like they couldn't get a good shot like of the two of them, and he was like, I just go
that's
see
perfect.
Really quick. I think that's kind of funny.
That's typical Ang Lee and Roberto talking about camera angles. It's just, the aesthetic doesn't look very well. We have to look at me.
He's like, just get in the scene.
Just get in the scene, because your height is perfectly matched to create the shot.
Yeah.
One of the most unsung cinematographers out there is Prieto. He's fantastic. And not to mention, he gets hired by some of the best directors.
There's a reason,
And there is a reason.
But I think it's because of that altering, that prism viewpoint that he brings to a movie, is that he doesn't have one specific style as much as he's able to adapt other directors' styles very well. And so it creates a sense where like you don't notice the cinematography as much unless someone says, look at the cinematography. It's like someone telling you don't think of an elephant. You're going to think of one. That's the only time you really notice the cinematography, is when someone points it out to you. But other than that, you're just lost in the world. And so that's kind of the problem, is like people don't talk about Prieto because he does things so well you don't think about him.
It should have won Best Picture, but did actually win a couple awards. If you have it down in your notes.
I've got 3 wins for Best Directing, Best Adapted Screenplay, and Best Original Score. Nominations for Best Picture, Best Lead Actor with Ledger, Supporting Actor with Gyllenhaal, and Supporting Actress with Williams, and Best Cinematography. So those were the 5 noms.
And how it did not get Best Costuming, because costuming fits so well for every part of the scene. And that's one thing, costuming gets lost in the aesthetics, but it's so important. Of course, Jake's going to wear this dark hat, almost like the enticement of going there.
Yeah,
a magnet almost.
And how certain elements of the costume play into the story. How Jack is looking for his coat that he needs to have to go visit the person he loves.
Right.
And that he wants to look at his best and have his favorite. Like, it's kind of like dressing up in that kind of way.
It's amazing that when you judge movies that people forget how important costuming is.
Well, and because costuming only really matters to certain people.
If you do fantasy, Victorian movie,
sci-fi, or Victorian
Dangerous Liaisons, then of course.
Yeah, that's when people notice it, and that's why you'll always see those best costuming. It's like 4 of the 5 movies every year are sci-fi, fantasy, or heavy period pieces, not like a Western as much.
Which is fascinating, because Star Trek has never been nominated for makeup or costuming. What the hell?
Yeah. But I will say this. If I had to, of these 8 nominations and 3 of them wins, if I had to just say you can only have one award, I do think I would give it to the score more than any of the performance. I love the performances in the movie, but man, that score.
It's kind of weepy.
That score is so great. It is a tragic, sad love song played in the way that a traditional Western would.
Foreboding, because we know it's not going to turn out good, no matter, even when they're the happiest. Mm-hmm. You're like, don't be happy. You're making it worse for yourself being happy.
Yep. And the large suite that comes in, the heavy theme that shows up with that is not overdone in the film. It's a very quiet, meandering score that just kind of punctuates certain scenes.
It is I forgot how quiet it is.
Yeah. And then finally when like the emotional crescendo happens and the big score comes in and actually like tells you like, here's how you should feel. It hits harder than the rest of the movie expects it to. So
I love the aesthetic of when they finally kind of getting a little bit of talking about their emotions exposition. All of a sudden there's a rushing water nearby or something like that.
Yeah.
The
gates have opened.
Gates have opened, yes. Which this is where Ang Lee is great at. He's not. I don't think he's good for superhero movies, but this is where Ang Lee can shine out most, is with characters and really the aesthetic of characters.
So yeah, Ang Lee's kind of an interesting director just because he's done so many genres, many different things.
Yeah.
And I think his problem with Hulk is a screenwriting problem more than anything else. I really like his visual take on Hulk. I think the paneling and everything like that works really well. I just think that the screenplay is kind of...
I do like the investigation of dad and, you're condemned by your dad's actions.
And like Life of Pi is another situation where I think he does a beautifully made movie that stumbles in some of the less presentable elements. Like the framing device, I think, doesn't work as well for Life of Pi. And then you have things like Gemini Man, where it's like, I get what you're going for, but that was a bad script 20 years ago, and it's still a bad script now. Like, that script never changed, and you can tell.
It's like, I understand for Brokeback Mountain, it's perfect. He's perfect for this. And then eventually maybe we'll get an Ice Storm. But here, when he does like Gemini, it's almost like he misses the window a little bit. Like, you're behind the trend.
Yeah. I just don't think he can polish a screenplay that's not... Like, I don't think as a director he can polish a screenplay and make it better.
No.
And that's maybe kind of his problem. Is like when you have a screenplay from Larry McMurtry and Diana Ossana, like it's fine, it'll be ready for you. Whereas some of the other stuff he's done has taken screenplays that either have been very old or very flawed in certain parts of their execution, and he kind of just like is at the whim of the screenplay he picks, and he doesn't always pick them right.
All right, but before we go, when Larry McMurtry won his Oscar, he showed up at the Oscars wearing blue jeans, boots, and just a tuxedo shirt with a flannel shirt, and I love it because he wore that, and then Jon Stewart's like, "You could do that? I don't have to wear a tuxedo. You could get away with just wearing jeans." I just remember Jon Stewart being mad, like, "Here I'm the host and I have to look nice. I didn't know I could just come in my sweatpants."
Yeah. What happened to great hosts at the Oscars, man? Because Jon Stewart was great.
Bring back Jon Stewart, maybe.
Yeah. There's so many elements.
That was hilarious. You should go back. He just wore blue jeans, which is an homage to the movie, right? Yeah.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah. And that's what I find so fascinating is that McMurtry, who has been writing screenplays for decades,
before I was born,
had been working with Diana Ossana for a while at that point as well, and they've done several things since then. And of course had written Western books. So like he's like the William Goldman of Westerns, where it's like he just was so entrenched in there that he wrote screenplays and he wrote novels and he like fixed up other people's work, and he's got such an iconic name for the genre. And so it's so great to me that he didn't even for a second think that he couldn't tackle this subject matter. No. You know, they saw Annie Proulx wrote the short story. Ossana had found it. Someone had told her to go check out this short story as it was published, and by the time she finished writing it, she was in tears, and she said, "I have to go get this done." And they went through it page by page, and that entire short story is in the movie. They just expanded upon it. They gave the characters more to do.
I think you need film-wise too. It's that kind of work. Yeah,
it's one of the best singular adaptations, and it's been years since I've read the short story, but I remember reading the story and being like, "This is the movie."
And I would say as for writers, if you're into writing and you want to know how to do dialogue, assigned to your character, you got to watch this movie because it's perfect.
Yeah, I would say as any writer looking to do work and to get out there and do more, get the short story, get the screenplay, and check out the comparisons between the two, because it's not only a feat of adaptation, but the story itself didn't have a lot of dialogue.
I think you're right. I don't think if you aren't going to adapt it, there wasn't much hard work.
Yeah,
there's a lot you can transition.
I think they said they'd gone through and they made like 50 pages of a screenplay when they just adapted the short story for what's there, and then that extension of it adds an extra like 80 pages. So they 2/3 of this is original content, but the way it adapts and translates that story is so well, and that's why I think look at how the adaptation is done, but then just look at the screenplay on its own merits. It's very well done, and it's very deserving of that win too.
As a story-wise for writing, I always say, Kyle agrees, I always look for, if you're telling me you're searching for your authentic self and where it hurts. And this movie does both.
There's a lot of hurt in the movie.
A lot of hurt.
Yeah.
So, have you seen Brokeback Mountain? My God, I think if I did a film class, I think it would be required viewing.
Very much so, yeah.
Especially if I did writer's workshop kind of a thing.
Yeah. So let us know your thoughts on the film. Is it the first postmodern Western, or is something else in there?
If you disagree with me, I love
to.
Yeah. Because we talked about the violence in the valley, whatever that kind of went back to the,
So we've covered some Westerns on the In the Valley of Violence, which was a Valley of Violence movie that didn't have a valley at all in it. I enjoyed the movie. But I also enjoyed Brokeback Mountain. So please let us know your thoughts on the film. Should we cover another Ang Lee film? Like we said, the director's got a lot of genres he worked in. Let us know
Ice
what we should
Storm's
be
a
talking
fascinating
about.
one to go back to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, we talk about a lot of big movies. We're going to talk about a lot of storm movies, I think, in the coming months. So, so let us know your thoughts on the film down below, and give us your personal interaction with the film too. I know it was important to a lot of people. There was actually within the first week of shooting, 2 of the crew members who worked on the film came out to their crew, and just because of like the connection to the material. So I know it's an important film for a lot of people, and we'd love to hear your stories as well for it. So please let us know down in the comments.
That's what films do.
Exactly, yeah. And while you're down there, like and subscribe. They're two
Yes,
things
please
that
do.
don't cost you anything.
Not
And you can
anything.
help support the channel at the same time, and make sure you never miss new episodes, because we have episodes Mondays, Thursdays, and Scary Movie Saturdays. We also have a Patreon that you can join, the link down in the description. Not only do you have ability to pick some of the movies that we're talking about, you also get access to Picks with Kyle and Nick. In July, we covered our top 5 Alfred Hitchcock films.
And we are working on making exclusive reviews, just exclusive for Patreons.
Yes, so you're going to be looking forward to that. Our first episode of that will be in August as well, so we're very excited to be bringing you more content for the Patreons, the people who support the channel.
Yes.
Please check out those links down in the description. It's so cheap to join. You get a lot of access to a lot of cool things. You can find out all my film reviews are available over at goatfilmreviews.com.
Hey, you can find my show, the St. Paul Filmcast, anywhere you find podcasts.
All right.
And I'm never going to be tired of beans.
I'm always tired of beans. Come on. Beans should be outlawed. Destroy them all.